Everyone, this is Mr. Sergei Eisenstein, the filmmaker from Moscow. He seems to be the latest victim of this strange practical joke.
Sergei, you of all people. Why, it must be 40 years at least since that crazy visit to Moscow. What are you doing here?
Well, same as you, I suppose. Did you get one of those letters, too?
Yes, but Miss Loring tells me it is some kind of mistake. Can you explain?
Well, it seems as if, yes, we all got these invitations inviting us to some sort of conference here, which, as it turns out, is a hoax.
You see, Mr. Eisenstein, someone forged our names.
I'm Florence Weil, Mr. Eisenstein.
My partner in crime, so to speak. Though certainly not this one.
We are just beside ourselves, as you can well imagine. But with all of you coming from the four corners of the globe.
What did you do such a thing, eh? Langston, can't you just see the headlines in Pravda now? Canadian capitalists kidnap red filmmaker.
Mysterious disappearance of a radical black poet in Toronto.
Now you must swear that you're not affiliated with any anti-Bolshevik league.
Well, I'm glad you were able to laugh about all this mess. And of course we'll put you up here at the church until we can sort it all out. We're a bit rough and ready. You're not allergic to cats, are you?
Francis, we should introduce Mr. Eisenstein around. Yukio? This Yukio Mishima from Japan.
Oh, very pleased to meet you. You were invited to this conference too?
Yes, the letter said something about a young writer's walk, and my mother thought it would be such an honor.
Your mother must be very disappointed. And you too.
I've had many disappointments in my life.
Yukio and I have been exploring the train schedules, but as it turns out, it's all very complicated. It seems as if we'll be here another day at least.
Well, at least it will be something for you to boast about to your friends when you get back home.
I have very few friends.
Mr. Eisenstein, this is Frida Kahlo from Mexico.
But of course. Frida Kahlo. Miss Loring, Frida and I have already met several years ago in her beautiful Mexico City when I was trying to finish Que Viva Mexico. Is Diego traveling with you?
Only the men seem to wonder where their husbands are. Langston asked the same question.
Now, Frida, that's unfair. I was simply wondering where Diego is now, that's all.
Anyone could tell you. It's the same as always. Fucking every American gringa that passes through town.
Miss Loring, it is very stupid of me to forget that since our last meeting, Frida has reassessed her politics and she is now no longer friendly with my country.
On the contrary, Miss Lawrence, it is Mr. Eisenstein's country that has reassessed its politics, while I have remained consistent.
You must be so thirsty. Perhaps I'll get you some beer.
Frida, how is your intimate friend, Mr. Trotsky, faring these days?
Sergei, if you were half the gossip you pretend to be, you'd know that Mr. Trotsky and I have been distant for some months now.
Oh, quit it, you two. Sergei, you still haven't met Frida's model. This is Mr. Dorian Gray from London. Frida's been painting his portrait all afternoon.
And I believe it's finished.
We're not supposed to have earthquakes in this part of town.
Who can that be?
Probably the next victim of this hoax. Who do you think, Langston? Thomas Mann?
I myself would prefer Gertrude Stein.
There's nobody there. There was just this box on the steps. With our luck, it's probably a
Bob? Oh, I don't know, Bob. It looks quite harmless.
June the 28th, 1987. Happy Lesbian and Gay Pride Day, everyone. Our apologies for bringing you here under false pretenses. However, it's an emergency. We have chosen you as outstanding lesbian and gay artists to help us resolve a crisis between the police and the gay community. In the province of Ontario, hundreds of men are arrested each year for having sex in public washrooms. Your mission, if you should choose to accept it, is to research this problem during the next 7 days and propose solutions. Of your group, Dorian Gray will infiltrate the police force as an undercover gay agent. Oh, by the way, this message will self-destruct in 10 seconds.
Sure, what now?
That old church on Glenrose. The one that's been empty since the two crazy women died.
What about it?
Complaint late last night from some neighbors. They saw lights inside. Our boys investigated and they found half a dozen hippies in there.
You're wasting my time with hippies, Jones.
Well, two of them, two women, say they own the place. They got ownership papers.
Well, keep an eye on them. Bring a camera. We're gonna need some photos.
I'm going to put it right down. There, that's for you. You'll be okay. You're being very good, aren't you? Yeah. Over here. Lauren Harris, now you come and get some of this. Don't you trouble the others. Now come on.
Dorian was the only one who seemed quite calm. He left in the morning and found his way down to the police station. As it turned out, they were expecting him. They had all the proper transfer papers. At least that part of our mission seemed to be working.
Well, if you're not going to talk, you might as well give me a section.
Take it. It's just the same old wars and famines and red baiting anyway. Stupid news for stupid people.
Ah, mierda. Your opinion of the 1980s is even worse than mine.
I'm not in the mood for conversation.
You are still upset about her recording, eh? Outstanding lesbian and gay artists. Ah.
I told you I don't want to talk about it.
You really are upset. Oh, pobrecito. Some little cat has let your secret out of the bag. The famous bachelor poet is a maricon.
Yes, you can laugh. I don't want to be around when Diego finds out about you.
Diego? Oh, que cabrón. But Diego knows all about my girlfriend. It's only my boyfriends he goes after with his pistol.
And why did they pick you, if you're such an ambidextrous type? You hardly seem to qualify as a card-carrying lesbian.
Ambidextrous? Well, my left hand always knows what my right hand is doing. And when I'm a lesbian, I'm an excellent lesbian.
I rushed off to our local library, which was mercifully still open, though not much improved in the intervening 50 years. Poor Florence was left with the job of cooking up her beloved A.Y. Jackson for dinner.
All this gay liberation stuff. Human rights for homosexuals.
Pass me that cord here. The black one.
Do you understand it, Mr. Eisenstein? What I mean to say is, I'm somewhat of an expert on the subject. Homosexuality, I mean. Not that I've had that much experience. I've led a sheltered life, but I've read a great deal. And, this doesn't make any sense to me.
Put this box over there.
Perhaps you could explain to me. You must know so much. You were selected for this mission. And of course, I'm sure that the Soviet Union is very advanced on these issues.
Are you trying to be coy with me?
Not at all. I'm very interested in sex under socialism.
Listen, Yukio, my private life is exactly that. It's private. As for my country, well, yes, off the record, there were a few years of openness and debate after the revolution, but that has long gone. I will do my best with my research for this project, but really, I am most unqualified.
Perhaps we could do some fact-finding together?
Francis Loren, born 1887, Wardner, Idaho, moved to Toronto in 1914 Florence while lived together for 50 years in an abandoned church on Glenrose Avenue, died 1968, sculptor, did many government commissions including Sir Robert Borden and Parliamental, Sir Frederick Banting, the Stone Lion at the Queen Elizabeth Way in Toronto, friends with many other artists including the Group of Seven, founded several artist organizations including the Sculpture Society of Canada, the Federation of Canadian Artists, National Arts Council, below the poverty line all her life, left-wing sympathizer, not politically active, lesbian bohemian, conversationalist.
This is all I've been able to get so far.
It's a start, but we need some more pictures.
We all enjoyed a passionate argument about the Spanish Civil War over dinner, though Florence had completely lost her appetite. Frida was very involved in the solidarity work, and Langston was due to depart for Spain the next month. Later, over some scotch we found unscathed in the cellar, I launched into my presentation. Well, my dears, here goes. My modest social history of the place that dare not speak its name, to misquote Dorian's friend. Or rather, the place we speak of with too many names. The Fog, the John, the Lou, the Lav, the Head, the Water Closet, the Privy, the Outhouse, the Kaibo, the Chaise Percée, the Garde-Robe, the Honey Bucket, the Can, the Vespasian, the Jakes, the Outhouse, the Jericho. In short, the much maligned toilet. History tells us that the first public facilities were built in the Palace of Knossos 4,000 years ago, with squat toilets flushed by drains that bear a remarkable resemblance to our present-day systems. Most of the great cities of the ancient world developed similar hygiene facilities. In the 1st century AD, the Roman Emperor Vespasian introduced the first public urinals. His motives were hardly altruistic. He collected the urine in great cisterns and sold it to cloth dyers, making a handsome profit in the process. Approaches to elimination varied vastly through the centuries and classes. Medieval monasteries often featured a line of holes in the upper turrets where the holy brothers could spend a companionable time together. Indeed, some claim that the biblical manuscripts they brought with them to study served as the first surreptitious form of toilet paper. Residents of European castles simply chucked the contents of their bedpans out the nearest window, thus making the task of swimming the moat a harrowing prospect. At 10 o'clock in the streets of Edinburgh, a drum roll would accompany a similar flinging of waste from the windows above. The approved shout of "Gardez-l'eau" from the French "Gardez-l'eau" served to warn unsuspecting passers-by to seek cover. Convincing people to use toilets was a difficult task. Aided by ankle-length dresses and no underclothing, ladies were accustomed to relieving themselves almost anywhere. A typical strategy was to simply pause astride a convenient gutter and gaze dreamily skyward. In desperation, an exclusive London men's club in the 19th century once posted a sign which read, "During the asparagus season, members are requested not to relieve themselves in the hat stand." It took the 19th century's combined obsessions with public transportation and Victorian prudery to construct thousands of public conveniences in railway stations. Various predecessors to toilet paper, invented in 1880, include the Roman scraper, shaped like a miniature hockey stick, the mussel shell, corn cobs, sand, powdered brick, earth, the Sears Roebuck catalogue, and the left hand, leaving the right hand for eating. Rabelais claimed the finest wipe was with the neck of a white swan. Pissing and shitting were once neutral and natural bodily functions. Not so anymore. In contemporary Western society, an entire culture of shame, disgust, and fetishization surround these acts. Freud, of course, built a career out of exploring the mythic concepts of shit as gold, shit as phallus, shit as death. Toilet culture has been featured in works by artists such as Marcel Duchamp, Klaus Oldenburg, and Carl Beveridge and Carol Condé. Urinals often promote backsplash, causing men to soil their clothes and the floor. For female urination using the typical commode, the situation is worse. Because of an exaggerated fear of disease, many women won't sit fully on the toilet seat, but rather hover erratically above it in a squatting position. This often results in urine on the toilet seat, which of course forces the next occupant to do the same, further adding to the mess. For defecation, the typical toilet promotes more constipation than bad diets. The natural position for shitting is squatting, as the Japanese with their elegant 19th century trenches have always known. When the thighs are pressed against the abdominal muscles, this greatly increases the emptying of the rectum. In Egypt, Herodotus stated, "Women stand erect to make water, the men stoop." Among the Irish, where women similarly enjoyed a relatively high social status, it is reported that the men discharged their urine sitting, the women standing. Among Muslim peoples, it was considered shameful for anyone to stand and, quote, "piss like a dog." Unisex washrooms were common in 19th century factories. Royal commissions investigating workplace conditions noted that glory holes were sometimes bored between toilet stalls, presumably for peeping toms and sexual play. Instead of addressing the widespread economic, physical, and sexual abuse that women were subjected to at the hands of their employers and male co-workers, the commissions focused instead on the so-called immorality of the women themselves. In other words, the glory holes were their fault. The state stepped in and legislated separate washroom facilities for men and women. While the motives were wrong, the result was beneficial. The washroom became the one place in society where men were not allowed, a refuge from the patriarchal order. The women's washroom has become a vital social place for conversation, sharing, and even organizing. Often management finds this threatening. For instance, in 1980, the Puretex factory installed a video surveillance camera over the women's washroom door, monitoring the length of the workers' breaks. The women went on strike, demanding the camera's removal, and eventually won, preserving their right to privacy. The segregated washroom also created the conditions for homosexual washroom sex to flourish. Yukio will continue tomorrow with his research on this topic.
It's an amazing portrait, Freda. One of your best.
It just seemed to paint itself. The light in the garden or something.
It does capture something wonderfully pure and fine in him. Something completely uncorrupt.
Poor Dorian. The painting will stay young and beautiful forever, while he grows old and debauched.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if he was always like this, but the picture withered?
Yukio worries me. He's quite peculiar for a boy his age. And Sergei and Frida. That horrible argument that they had last night about the Fourth International, you know, I thought they'd kill one another.
It seemed to me like they were enjoying themselves.
Crazy bunch of people just to throw together.
Don't fuss so, pet. We're together, that's what counts. We might as well have a little fun.
Fun. Can't imagine how.
You have no imagination.
Queenie.
The Wild Woman. She did a subject search under the heading Urinal.
Code name?
No, it's an acronym. The boys on the 14th floor researched it. It stands for the Iranian Resistance Initiative of the Nonpartisan Action League, Urinal.
Urinal, Think it's time to bug the church?
Let's get a little more info on the others first.
Yukio Mishima, pen name for Kimitaki Horika, born 1925 in Tokyo, famous Japanese author, 35 novels, 25 plays, 200 short stories, 8 books of essays, had family, 2 kids, themes of work, alienation, homosexuality, corruption, Japanese tradition, fascinated by blood, sex, suicide, interests, bodybuilding, samurai tradition. In 60s, obsessed with right-wing politics, formed private army dedicated to emperor and restoring Japan's imperial strength. After failed army coup, committed ritual suicide in 1917.
Washroom sex, as old as the public washroom itself, related to park sex, beach sex, sauna sex, elevator sex, alley sex, train sex, plane sex, church sex, gym sex. Where is this history recorded? Certainly, there is no authoritative volume on the subject. Instead, what we remember consists of fragments, fleeting images from taxis unclo, and prick up your ears, lurid headlines from post-war crime tabloids, short scenes in novels, plays, and poems. For instance, Janae Anon wrote beautifully, if briefly, on the subject. Sociological studies of deviant behavior, perhaps most accurately and extensively, pornography. I'll begin with a section from my own novel, which I am going to write in 15 years. He entered the dim, clammy lamplight of the restroom, and saw what is called an office among the fellowship. It was an office where the tacit office procedure is based on winks instead of documents, tiny gestures instead of print, code communication in place of a telephone. They are all my comrades, Yuichi thought as he walked. Rank, occupation, age, beauty notwithstanding, they are a fellowship welded by the same emotion, by their private parts, let us say. What a bond, in hatred, in jealousy, in scorn, coming together for a short moment of love just to keep warm. Y went into second stall, unzipped pants and began to masturbate with his back to me. I went to door and peered out. X moved swiftly and Y turned around to facilitate X's masturbating. Z stood at the urinal less than a minute, halted for another minute opposite stalls, then went into stall with X, who proceeded to fillet him. Y then stood on the toilet seat, watching X and C while A sucked Y. A had to crouch but continued to masturbate. X kneaded C's buttocks and ran his hands up and down the back of C's legs. When C finished, he left without wiping. A finished with Y about this time, went to urinal 3 and spit. Y wiped and left.
As the result of an intensive drive staged by the police, more than 15 homosexual prostitutes and their male patrons have been rounded up recently in Toronto's High Park, Decency prevents even as outspoken a publication as Justice Weekly from going into detail, Suffice that a hole was found by the police to have been bored in the wall, between 2 cubicles in the men's lavatory. Like, through this, the active and passive homosexuals indulged in their disgusting sex orgies.
Last week, I went to a nearby piss house and got me 5 cocks, 3 assholes, and a couple of drinks of piss, plus cum from all cocks. Went into the place, and there were 2 guys at the urinal, both with a beautiful hard-on, but both cut. They each wanted to be sucked, but neither sucked, so all I did was sink to my knees, open my mouth, and eat one and then the other. They both shot in a hurry and left right after. Just 1 load from each. Homosexuality is a constant problem for the police in large centers. And if the police adopt a laissez-faire attitude towards such individuals, city parks, intended for the relaxation of women and children and youth recreation purposes, will become rendezvous for homosexuals. In addition to his immoral conduct, the homosexual requires further police attention, as he is often the victim of gang beatings or robberies with violence, an easy prey for the extortionist and blackmailer. Homosexuals have been stabbed and wounded, and in a few cases have been murdered. The saddest feature of all, however, is that homosexuals loiter in public washrooms, corrupting others and constantly recruiting youth of previous good character into their fraternity. For many of us, the only place we can go for sexual company are the washrooms. We sneak in, shamefully, like mangy dogs. Why? Our culture covers up the smell. The walls shout of love and liberty. We toss out the dirty paper. Long live the washroom. If the first Christians had their meetings among skeletons and corpses, why should we be ashamed to meet in piss and fermented shit? We will conquer a space filled with light and windows, ceilings of sequins, floors of crystal. We don't need any Constantine. Long live the stinking washrooms. Some already merit bronze plaques.
I loved my friend, he went away from me. There's nothing more to say. The poem ends as soft as it began. I loved my friend.
Hey, that's my poem.
Perhaps your friend is a dream deferred. What happens to a dream deferred?
And that's my poem, too.
You haven't answered my question.
My friend was no dream, he was a sailor.
Ah.
And you seem to me to be a romantic fool.
Oh, no, I just like poetry, and paintings.
It's almost like he's watching us.
Isn't he?
Hey, that's very cute, but this is my bed.
I thought you might need a little Christian company.
I'm much too sacrilegious. And anyway, St. Sebastian fantasies really aren't my thing.
I was hoping we could be sacrilegious together.
Thanks, but no thanks.
Look, this is 1987. Your friends are dead. You're lonely. You need some company.
Yukio, that's not a very convincing argument. Ah. Well, that, on the other hand, is a somewhat more convincing argument. What are you doing? Well, that's even more convincing.
Sergei Eisenstein, born 1819 in Riga, died 1948, spent early years doing theatre and cartooning. On the eve of the Bolshevik Revolution, published a cartoon signed with the pseudonym Sergei, pursued Karain, film on the new regime. Directed Strike and Battleship Potemkin in 1924-25, which established reputation as brilliant filmmaker. Traveled extensively in Europe and North America, divided time between writing, filmmaking, and teaching. Encountered constant difficulties with Soviet censors and bureaucracy. Remained prolific and controversial throughout his career. Fluent in 4 languages, wife, no children, suspected homosexual.
You knew the others previously?
He met Callow and Hughes in the early 30s.
I think this picture's coming together.
Here I am at the Royal York Hotel, home of Toronto's most famous and most dangerous tea room. Note the layout. This initial foyer with mirrors and sinks is separated from the urinals and cubicles by a narrow passage. Note the somber lighting, the Baroque color scheme, perfect for a discreet encounter. Unfortunately, over the years, this has also been a favorite hangout for undercover cops who do dozens of arrests here each month.
I like the colonnade because there tends to be more variety in the types of men that go there. And I've had a lot of sort of orgies there, groups of 3 and 6. It's quite a small washroom, and so there's a feeling of intimacy in a way. So when there's 6 men there, I don't know, there's just a really nice feeling in a small space, and there's a sense of privacy because it's as though it's just your washroom. Quite often there's a guy standing at the door while other people are having sex, and he will cough or make a noise when someone comes in. So there's a sort of a feeling of community at that washroom.
The behavior that was involved when the arrest took place occurred in between 2 of the cubicles in the washroom in the bay in Oakville, because there's a toilet paper dispenser that is broken, and you can reach back and forth, for example, between the 2. Another person was already in the 1 cubicle when I arrived, and there was a prolonged sexual exchange between the 2 of us. There was cocksucking involved, and there was some other fondling of body parts, both through the opening and also under the cubicle wall. And that went on for quite a long period of time. Very few people came into the washroom during that time. We always stopped, of course, during those periods of time. But we were alone in the washroom for several minutes, certainly. The other person left the washroom before I did. I was alone in the washroom at that time. I came out of the cubicle, and as I was washing my hands in the sink, the officer came into the washroom, and I was arrested at that point.
Well, I'm here, and if there's a guy over there, and I'm at the urinal, I want to get his attention. First I make eye contact with him, and then usually I'm really, it's easy for me to get a hard-on, so right away I have a hard-on. So I just usually, well, I play with my cock, and if he looks over at my cock, then I'm pretty sure that he's into cruising. So then I flash my hard-on so then he knows for sure. And then usually he comes over.
The cubicle. Number 1. Choose one next to an occupied one. Number 2. After 2 minutes, flush your toilet, but don't leave. They may do the same. Number 3. Tap your foot. They may tap theirs. Number 4. Pass notes back and forth, discussing what sort of sex you're into. And number 5. Assuming the washroom is empty, you now have several choices. A, you can both stand on the toilets and watch each other jerk off. B, you can blow each other under the divider. C, you can crowd into one cubicle. Or D, have sex with the cubicle doors open, ready to retreat if anyone enters the washroom.
All kinds of men go to washrooms, students, blue-collar workers, professionals, older men, young men, men of all races, fat men, good-looking men, ugly men, people that are into all different kinds of costumes, people that are into S&M.
I entered a plea of guilty to the charge of gross indecency. I guess primarily for 2 reasons. One, because I was aware that there was video evidence of the behavior, and secondly, in order to have the matter resolved as quickly as possible and to avoid the possibility of there being publicity.
The Hart House washroom at the University of Toronto has quickly become my favorite, though I've heard it gets regularly patrolled by campus police. Note the beautifully carved glory hole in the stone divider. Not big enough for a cock, I'm afraid, but certainly adequate for two-way observation.
Quite often, because sex in a washroom is so anonymous, especially if I'm in the stall, no one knows that I'm Chinese. And I find that it's easier for me to get sex in a washroom if they don't know I'm Chinese. Although at the same time, I found that even when men do see my face, because for some reason, well, because they go there, if they're going to cruise, it's for sex, not for a relationship or for companionship, that they're more into just into the male anatomy, and they really don't care quite often about whether my dick is Chinese or whether it's a big dick or a small dick. They just want a dick to suck on or a dick to jerk off with.
3 or 4 days after the conviction, the Hamilton Spectator in the Burlington edition published my name and my place of employment as being the Synapse Youth Center and the fact that I was the director of a program there. That resulted in my being suspended for a brief period of time and then transferred into a totally administrative job, much less visible, and which I didn't have a great deal of interest in. I grieved the suspension and the transfer, and the result of that, after some considerable time, since I had no interest and haven't historically had any interest in working in a downtown office away from direct service, resulted in my, in fact, leaving the Ministry of Community and Social Services.
Queer bashing is not a danger at all. This makes the tea rooms much safer than the parks, where numerous beatings and several murders of gay men have occurred over the last few years. In my thorough investigation, I rated types of sex according to frequency. Number 1, most common, two men watching each other masturbate. Number two, next most common, mutual masturbation. Number three, occasional blowjobs, often without swallowing. I never once saw fucking, which isn't surprising given how complicated it is. In short, the majority of sex acts seemed to conform to safer sex guidelines developed because of the AIDS crisis.
I'm finding that AIDS seems to have taken some of the fun out of washroom sex. People just don't. The washrooms don't seem to be as crowded as they used to, and not as much activity is going on, and they don't seem to be as fun now. There's a lot less sucking going on. It's mostly, I think, mutual masturbation.
When the decision was made to launch an appeal, sometime following that, I had an opportunity to see the video and to have an experience that was a thoroughly unexpected one for me. I didn't ever expect to see myself behaving sexually on tape. It was a very self-affirming experience. I was rather surprised by how good I felt, even given the anxiety-provoking experience and the anxiety-provoking circumstances. Even given that, it was a very self-affirming experience to have, to watch yourself behaving sexually on tape. I was delighted by how human and how physical and how sexual and how beautiful I was, and I was surprised.
Well, the reason I'm doing this interview is because not a lot of men talk about the fact that they go to washrooms to have sex, but there's thousands of men doing it, and no one seems to talk about it. And they seem to be afraid that people will criticize them, or they're ashamed that they do. But I don't think people should be ashamed that they go to washrooms to have sex, because it's a legitimate place for having sex. But the reason I'm doing it in disguise, though, is because, well, for quite a number of reasons.
I agreed to do this interview because it's important that the issue be given, that the issue be interpreted, and that the issue be given publicity in order for there to be discussion in the lesbian gay community and also in the larger community far more widely than has been the case about this issue.
Another reason is because I have no control over who's going to see this film, and I don't want it to be used against me in the future by some courts of law or some obscure relatives that don't know even that I'm gay.
And so, my friends, that is what I have discovered about the pleasures of washroom sex.
I find it absolutely disgusting and immoral. I just cannot condone this anonymous sex. There is absolutely no commitment.
Oh, it has nothing to do with commitment, Florence. The fact is that you're talking about this sex in public washrooms. I mean, these are public places, Sergei. Children walk into them all the time.
Beings have always sought the satisfaction of desire among the groves, the fountains, the caves of nature.
Sex in public washrooms is not beautiful. It's not pretty. It's ugly. It's dirty. It's perverse. But that's what's exciting about it. That's what drives men to these acts.
Men are driven. Ha! Men have always thought that they have the divine right to have sex whenever and wherever they want.
Your sweeping generalizations are just as bad as Sergei's romanticism.
do you know about that new officer, Dorian Gray?
Not much. He's a transfer from Mississauga, isn't he?
Boys on the 10th floor tell me he lives in that same church.
Is that so? Let's get him in here.
Early passage might amuse you. In 1940, when I was 16, I went to entertain the wound. I took cigarettes. I did not kiss anyone on the lips, like Mr. Walt Whitman. I entertained them with my drawings. Now, the wounded officers politely put up with me for a few days, but in the end, they asked me to draw them girls. They ordered subjects from the ever-popular themes of water closet folklore. Well, George Gross, the artist, took graffiti on urinal walls as a stylistic model for his drawings, so why not me? Besides, I could never do pin-up Vargas girls. Reader?
Well, Sergei, mine is actually much better. Listen to this. It's magnificent. Diego Rivera actually encouraged Frida's homosexual affairs. Some say because he knew that as an older man, he could not or did not want to satisfy his much younger wife. Jean Van Hagenot surmises that he considers Frida's lesbian affairs a sort of safety valve.
Safety valve?
I think I found something. Mishima's private life at this time bore a resemblance to that led by Yuichi, a character in Forbidden Colors. He knew far more about boys than we did, remarked one of his literary friends. He patronized the Brunswick, a gay bar in the Ginza. There he met the 17-year-old Akihiro Maruyama, who had just begun a golden career in the gay bars, from which he was to graduate to the theater, where he became the most celebrated female impersonator of his day. The two men danced together sometimes, but they did not have an affair. According to Maruyama, who did not think him handsome, he was not my type.
What is your type,
Letters were not all that Langston had received from County Cullen, the Harlem Renaissance poet. County had also sent him a sensual poem inscribed for L.H. and titled it To a Brown Boy. This is the part that I like. Hughes surely sensed the nuances in the poem. By then he knew, too, that there was between him and fellow poets Locke and Cullen an attraction to their own sex.
Very delicately put. I know one never seemed quite sure about us. No. I read this book from cover to cover and could only find one sneaky reference. It was not until some time later that they learned that Laredo Taft, still nursing his bitterness towards Florence, self-persuaded that she had not fully appreciated all he had done for her, had written the sculptor French, warning him that Florence and Francis were not only inconsequential sculptors, but a couple of lesbians to boot. It was their first brush with this innuendo.
And their last.
Next. Dorian, it's your turn.
Dorian.
We stopped bickering out of necessity. So many books to read, so many new ideas. I mean, we all had our different ways of talking about sex, but this was like learning a new language.
Been with us a few days, I believe.
Yes, sir.
Living on Glen Roselle, I see. Nice place, Gray?
Yes, sir.
Tell us a bit about it, Gray.
There's nothing much to tell, sir.
Living with a bunch of artists, I see, Gray.
Yes, sir.
Tell us about these artists you live with, Gray.
That's my private life, sir.
We're very interested in your private life, Gray.
So, what is this? You're going to paint this?
Maybe. It's a group portrait, though, not a still life.
Ah, our strange little group, eh? Which one am I?
Tu masques? It's quite symmetrical, you notice? 3 women, 3 men, the different countries, the different colors, the play between south and north, east and west, even the ages.
You must be careful, Frida, or it will look like one of those posters that our Foreign Relations Commissariat produces for international proletariat unity.
Perfect fucking harmony.
The composition is so perfect, it's insidious. You picked the fruits too well, eh?
Oh, but I didn't pick the fruit, Sergei.
No, I suppose not.
Langston Hughes, born 1902, Joplin, Missouri, died 1967 in Harlem. Prolific poet, essayist, and playwright. Active in the Harlem Renaissance of the 20s, wrote extensively in themes of racism and black culture. Spent 2 years in the Soviet Union and 6 months as a journalist in Spain during the Civil War. Identified strongly with the Communist Party, supporting its causes and writing for its publications, though he never joined. During this period, his poetry became militantly anti-imperialist. Never married, suspected homosexual.
Seven washroom busts in less than 2 years, in 7 small southwestern Ontario towns. Coincidence? Each time, about 30 men were charged with gross indecency. Each time, the evidence was collected with hidden video cameras. Coincidence? Here's how the busts happen. A typical example. Police get a complaint about a public washroom. They investigate but can't get any evidence. They know something's going on. But every time they go in, nothing's going on. Just a bunch of men combing their hair. They need evidence. Without evidence, there's no crime. They know the men are doing more than combing their hair. They call the OPP, Ontario Provincial Police. The OPP has a new video surveillance system. Coincidence? The OPP installs it over the cubicles. Sometimes 1 camera, sometimes 3 cameras. They monitor everything and videotape the sex, sometimes for 6 weeks. They follow the men, figure out where they live. They decide they have enough evidence. They arrest the men and charge them. They release the names to the local press, who publish them. Because the towns are so small, everyone knows. Sometimes the men lose their jobs. Sometimes they lose their friends and families. Sometimes their lives are destroyed. Sometimes they leave town, sometimes they stay. In court, they plead guilty and receive fines of a few $100s or absolute discharges for first offenses. The police and courts have done their job. That's generally how it goes. The OPP move on to the next town. It happens again. Coincidence? That's how it went in Aurelia in September 1983. The washroom was in the basement of the Aurelia Opera House. It's locked up now. They arrested 32 men, including a high school principal, a concert pianist, a construction worker. I called some of them half-heartedly. It was easy finding their numbers from the list in the papers. Most of them hung up immediately. I couldn't blame them. One met me for coffee and talked about the town. He's married with 2 kids. His wife and friends were pretty supportive. He lost his job as a high school teacher and now works for an accounting firm. He's not bitter. He tells me he really has been depressed since the war. Lowest average income, 21% unemployment. It was going to be an important town once. Stephen Leacock satirized it in his book, Sunshine Sketches of a Small Town. In his book, he called the town Mariposa. I smile and say that's the Spanish word for queer. But he says no. He's thinking of Maricon. Mariposa means butterfly. Butterfly nut, wing nut, rush light, blind man's bluff. I go to Guelph, to Silver Creek Park, to the public washroom. In June '85, the police did 2 days of surveillance and arrested 18 men. A few things were different this time. The police didn't release the names. The press didn't publish them. A local gay community organized a defense fund and support group for the men. A university student pleaded not guilty, claiming that video surveillance violated his right to privacy under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The judge agreed, but still allowed video evidence to be shown in court and found the student guilty, along with the other men. I tried to reach the student. The number had been disconnected. I wandered through the park several times. Every time I went by the washroom, it was empty. Across the street, down a block, is the OPP police station. People looked at me suspiciously. I'd never been in a town that was so white. I wrote down which movies were playing, which magazines were on sale, which songs were on the radio. The same ones as the ones in Aurelia, Kitchener, Oakville, Hamilton, Welland, Beverly Hills Cop Part 2, The Terminator, Time, Newsweek, Heavy Metal Rocker, Papa Don't Preach. I asked the movie ticket lady if they ever had Canadian films. She didn't understand. I went to Welland, but the Seaway Mall was closed. That's the washroom where they arrested 33 men in December 1983. A local magazine wrote a sarcastic editorial about the video surveillance, accusing the cops of wanting to make movies like Steven Spielberg. Sergeant Bob Shannon retaliated by suing the magazine for libel. The Seaway Mall is half an hour from the Fairview Mall in St. Catharines. It was also closed when I got there. The washroom where the bust took place was open then, because it was attached to a restaurant. I tried to go in, but the owner threw me out. When I told him about my research, he called me a queer lover. He took down my license plate and called the police. I left. The St. Catharines bust became a cause célèbre. The papers were filled for weeks with articles and letters. Example: as a taxpayer, I gladly support police surveillance. It prevents innocent children or bystanders from being raped. Another example: I don't care how much of the taxpayers' money is used to rid all public washrooms of you sick people. Another: not only should the names be published, but also pictures of the disgusting offenders. One of the 32 men arrested in St. Catharines was a 42-year-old salesman, a Sunday school teacher, father of 2. He was called into the police station on January 5th and charged with gross indecency. He returned home, kissed his wife and kids goodbye, and drove away in his car. While driving slowly along a country road, he poured gasoline over his body and flicked his lighter. When the car was discovered in the ditch, his body was burned so badly that dental records had to be used to identify him. The suicide made headlines across the country. Some of the same people who had applauded previous washroom busts now questioned whether the police had gone too far, perhaps even driving this man to his death. Some newspapers ran sympathetic articles describing how washrooms were the only safe meeting places for small-town gay men. Even arch-right-winger Barbara Meal in the homophobic Toronto Sun condemned the police, saying 2 children are fatherless and a man suffered a horrible death because we lack charity, compassion, and the political will to bring our police forces back into line. St. Catherine's in Guelph in 1985 were the last big busts of that sort. All that high-tech surveillance equipment is probably gathering dust somewhere, since it isn't useful for anything else. Of course, local police forces might still be using other tactics, like entrapment with undercover cops, the way they do it in Toronto. If so, they're not publicizing it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Because, of course, the sex is still happening. The surveillance, the scandals, the names scared off only a few people. When you're married and have 2 kids, and there's nowhere to go, what do you do? When you're 17 and can't tell anyone, where do you go? These towns don't care, not really. They only feel guilty when you kill yourself. And they're pretty good at forgetting about that after a few weeks. After all, it's your own fault. Coincidence?
Somewhere over the rainbow, where a pie, there all a place I dreamed of once in a lullaby. Away above the chimney tops, where troubles melt like lemon drops.
I thought I'd shower with you to save water.
Oh, you did you? What prompted this sudden concern for natural resources, eh?
I've been inspired by Miss Wilde's love of nature.
Oh, well, it sounds a little out of character to me.
I'm full of surprise. Besides, I can scrub your back.
Well, then all right. As long as you keep it clean and at ease, so to speak.
Don't worry. I'll...
Good morning. Don't let me interrupt. I just came to see if you'd like some coffee.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you, Frida. Perhaps you'd like to go to the kitchen and make it.
I'm also worried about our fucking mission.
I'm also worried about my fucking privacy.
We do all this research we don't even care about. We sit around and argue every night about toilets.
Well, I'm afraid that if we don't come up with something, they're going to keep us here.
And Dorian, how does his police work fit in? He barely talked to us about it. If I was him, I would be stealing files and putting poison in the police chief's coffee.
Dear, dear Frida, why don't you just go percolate someplace else?
Never wrote homosexual poems, did you?
Of course not. Well, a few here and there. But they're private. Can you imagine UMass is publishing something like that?
I'd like to see them sometime. It would be good fun to make a film on this homosexual theme. But of course, it's impossible.
The laws censors the public, don't I know it? Remember what Radcliffe Hall went through when she published The Well of Loneliness? I don't think we're that brave. Tell you the truth, though, Sergei, I don't think I'd want to anyway.
Oh, you mean that if you were alive today, you wouldn't be doing this gay art thing that seems to be all the rage in the trendy circles?
I doubt it. It seems so superficial. Gay art, gay art. Can you imagine when I go to Spain next month, if I start writing about the impact of the Civil War on homosexuals? Or in the South with the Scottsboro boys, if I interviewed them on their sexual preferences and their way to get the chair?
Homosexuals have gotten the chair too, you know.
Yes, but you can't compare Jim Crow with cocksucker.
No, you're right. It's different. We have our priorities.
I wish I was back in Moscow. Yes, I know what you mean. I wish I were in Harlem.
That Gray's up to something. Our guy who's been watching the house says that he spends all his time up in the attic washroom.
Any ideas about what to do?
Oh, we could put a camera in there, if that'd help.
Yukio went out that afternoon and rented movies from a video store. He came back terribly smug because there was a big Hollywood feature about his life, while for the rest of us there were only modest documentaries. He also found an old black and white film about Dorian, based on that biography by Oscar Wilde. But when Dorian saw it, he turned quite white and left the room.
Born 1881, Trenton, Illinois, died 1968, Toronto. Lived nearly 50 years in Church of Francis Lauren, became a sculptor. Subject matter was often female nude. Some works supported by National Gallery. Did memorial to Edith Cavell on University Avenue. Was active in various artist societies. Always dressed as a man, fond of cats.
Looks like a real sour bitch, eh?
Seems that way. The Art Gallery of Ontario is having a retrospective of their work this month.
In researching my topic, I made numerous attempts to interview the Attorney General Ian Scott and the police chief, Jack Marks. Both refused to talk to me once they heard what my subject was. In contrast, I talked at length with two gay activists who have done work around the issue.
Court Watchers is an organization which a group of people in the city of Toronto put together about the time of the bath raids in 1981. As a result of the fact that we'd observed a lot of people who were going through the courts on charges of indecent act, gross indecency, that sort of thing. And we realized that they were going through the courts and not knowing who to talk to in terms of lawyers, what was going to happen to them. And were being dealt with rather poorly by the courts because of the homophobic nature of most of the courtrooms.
The police force, through its intelligence department, had focused in on the gay community as a nice source of arrests. They like to think of it in terms of a pool of crime. We think of ourselves rather as victims of an organization looking for fodder.
While gross indecency charges usually involve two or more people in a, quote, public setting, for instance,
a park, a washroom, a parked car, indecent act charges are less serious and generally apply to someone caught masturbating. Typically, these arrests are performed by CIBs, or plainclothes officers.
The cops will go to almost any extent to make their arrest. They'll position themselves next to the person at the urinal. They will look into the other person's urinal, trying to get a look at the other person's crotch. They will pretend to be masturbating, and in some cases they will actually, according to some people's testimony, have actually masturbated in their presence. However, the major problem that we're experiencing is that when they get to court, all of this is totally denied. The officer was conducting himself in a totally observer role, and none of the actual participation that the officer did in the acts is brought out in court. Because if it was brought out, then the judge would toss these cases out.
Benefits for police officers are they have a sort of notional quota that they have to fill each month. There's a computer printout that comes out showing how many criminal code and how many provincial offense arrests and summonses and so on that they've issued. And for the police officers, this is a nice, easy target pool to bring up one's criminal code arrests for the month.
In, I would say, about 75% of the cases, the victim or the accused comes to court and says, I didn't do anything. I simply was looking at this man. He was looking at me. I was looking at him. I thought that he was attractive. And no actual offense occurred. But when the officer gets into court and gives his evidence, he creates the crime in his evidence. He claims that the accused was doing such and so, when in reality nothing ever did happen.
People who use washrooms for sex fall into a number of categories, but the largest category is people who aren't socially gay. They have heterosexual type families, wives, children, homes in the suburbs, although that's a bit of a stereotype, and they tend to get whatever gay sex that they can in anonymous situations like washrooms. The irony of it is they think of those places as safer than walking into a gay bar, because walking into the washroom doesn't identify them as gay.
Washroom sex for the gay community is one of those areas which is one of the taboo areas that we've never really come out of the closet over. We've never been able to, within the gay community, identify it as an aspect of our liberation, of our coming to grips with our own sexuality. And so there's still a great deal of self-oppression within this particular area. And most gay men, if arrested on a washroom sex, will not even tell their friends. They will sneak in the court and plead guilty and hope that absolutely no one ever finds out.
Typically, a man who pleads guilty gets off with a small fine or discharge. The trauma of being caught is a much greater penalty. At 400 cases per year in downtown Toronto, these indecent act arrests are costing taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in police and court costs. So who benefits? Only the police, it seems, who get paid time and a half for court appearances and maintain their monthly quotas. I asked Dennis what the alternatives are.
If there is a management that feels that they have a washroom which is a problem washroom for whatever reason, there are a number of ways in which they can deal with it. They can post signs telling people that there's loitering is forbidden. They could put a lock on the door, as some gas stations do, and only give out the key to those people who come to a cashier and want to use the washroom. They can use the uniformed security officers that they have around the premises already on salary to patrol the washrooms and encourage people to move on, stop loitering, and that sort of thing. And they can also do trespass arrests on their own. They can issue trespass notices to people who they find are loitering on a regular basis. And most often, when this does happen, the people who are issued with trespass notices are so freaked out over that they never go back to the washroom anyway. So the problem, if it's a problem, gets resolved right there. What the police can do is stop using plainclothes officers and start using uniformed officers, so that a uniform walking into a washroom is definitely going to bring a stop to anything that could potentially be going on. A uniformed officer that's seen around a particular washroom is definitely going to deter that washroom being used on a regular basis as a cruising territory.
Gross indecency, a law that has been on the books since 1892, was repealed in January 88 by Bill C-15. Sven Robinson, Canada's first out-of-the-closet gay member of Parliament and justice critic for the New Democratic Party, was responsible for the repeal.
Up until 1968 in Canada, all homosexual activity was entirely illegal. In 1968, Pierre Trudeau made his famous speech that the state has no place in the bedrooms of the nation, which of course was absolute nonsense because the gross indecency law, which was then brought in, had three basic components. First, that homosexual activity is grossly indecent. All homosexual activity is grossly indecent. But we will tolerate it in our society subject to three conditions. First, that both participants must be at least 21 years of age. Secondly, that there can only be two and no more than two participants. And thirdly, that the offense of gross indecency itself can only occur, the act can only occur in what is deemed to be a private place. And it's this distinction between private and public place that has led to so many charges and such abuse of the law at the hands of the police. The law now, after C-15, is quite different. In fact, no longer is homosexual activity dealt with at all in the criminal code. There is an age of consent now for all sexual activity in Canada of 14, subject to one exception, and it's obviously a glaring exception, and one which some of us tried to have eliminated, but that is the offense of buggery, or as it now is called, anal intercourse. In that case, there are still the same restrictions that apply. Two participants in private, and the age has been reduced from 21 to 18. So the law has moved. The law has moved significantly since 1968 in the area of gross indecency. It still hasn't moved to full equality for gays and lesbians, but we've made some important progress.
The police, of course, can still use indecent act charges in washroom busts. In the early 80s, some estimate that over 1,000 men were arrested in Ontario each year. However, in downtown Toronto at least, that has started to change.
1987 and the 86 actual decrease in indecent act arrests comes as a result of, number one, the new prostitution, communicate for the purpose of engaging prostitution law, which now has tons of police officers busy trying to clean the streets of prostitutes in response to the cries of all of the middle-class, capital gain homeowners in places like Cabbagetown who want to get rid of whatever is degrading their property values from time to time, as if their profits weren't enough already.
In other words, a mixture of gains and losses. On the upside, gross indecency has been repealed, abortion has been legalized, and smoking has been banned. On the downside, AIDS quarantine legislation has been enacted in British Columbia, and a new censorship law threatens to criminalize any and all sexual images. These contradictory defeats and victories mean one thing: state intervention is alive and well and on the rise.
It's scary because, in effect, what we're saying is that while in 1968 the state was supposed to be getting out of the bedrooms of the nation, in 1987 the state and the police are back in the bedrooms of the nation with a vengeance. And not just back in the bedrooms of the nation, and I think this is important, but they're back in the living rooms of the nation, and the dining rooms of the nation, and the backyards of the nation, and the cinemas, and the theaters, and in the libraries, and the art galleries. And we must do everything we can to say to those who would attempt to impose this kind of narrow-minded mentality that we will not accept it, that we in this country have a Charter of Rights that guarantees freedom of expression, and that we demand that that be respected.
Men wear masks to make themselves beautiful. But unlike a woman's, a man's determination to become beautiful is always a desire for death.
We know the group is going to make its move soon. We need some times, dates, places.
They're doing nothing but research. They don't discuss their plans with me.
We know about the attic, Grey. We know you've got a secret.
There's no secret.
One more day, Dorian. This is your last chance.
No one would talk to me after the film last night.
Can you blame us? Well, we thought you were such a nice young man. Now it turns out you're going to be a terrible fascist and kill yourself.
Oh, that. I'm sure there's plenty that the film left out. I thought I looked rather sexy in my army uniform.
But that's what your life's going to be.
Maybe the events. But Hollywood doesn't know anything about post-war politics, about Japan, about the samurai tradition. And clearly, neither do you Americans.
I'm a Canadian now, thank you very much.
You all look the same to me. But you'll never learn anything about my life or Japan if you trust your own movies.
Have you noticed? My painting is missing. I have asked Dorian where it is, and he said he didn't know.
That's very strange.
He is very strange. For the last few days, he's been locking himself in that attic washroom for hours on end. Do you have the key?
Well, yes, but shouldn't we respect his privacy?
Oh, chingada, it's your house.
Langston, wake up. I brought you a nightcap. I'm sure you cannot sleep in this heat.
I was asleep, and I will be again when you're gone.
Oh, come on, drink up. Look, Langston, I found the most interesting book. It's all about how you have what they call safe sex.
Oh, Sergei, this is our last night here. I really need my sleep, please.
Well, exactly. It is our last opportunity to experience what they call, where is it? The new sexual ethics that have resulted from the AIDS crisis.
Well, try your luck with Yukio.
Now, look, I brought some condoms and some lubricant. Oh, Langston, try to understand. It is your duty to participate.
It is the worst come-on line I've ever heard.
Now, but look at all these interesting positions. Now, why don't we just start by putting on this condom?
Why would he try to hide it away? Perhaps he feels shy about it?
Mierda. That man doesn't have a shy bone in his body.
But Frida, I have to pee first. Do you mind? I'm a little old-fashioned about privacy.
I've been inspired. This must be how they do it.
Do what?
Oh, Florence, you know.
Frida, no, this is hardly the place.
This is exactly the place. We're doing research.
This is all my fault. I'm afraid I've been flirting with you shamelessly.
Exactly.
No, Frida, I want you to understand that I would never dream of betraying Francis.
Your loyalty. It is very attractive to me.
Oh.
Frida Kahlo, born 1907, Coyoacán, Mexico City, died 1954. At age 18, suffered a traffic accident that caused her severe medical problems for the rest of her life. Began painting during convalescence. Married Diego Rivera, famous Mexican muralist, and for a brief time General Secretary of the Communist Party of Mexico. traveled extensively throughout the United States and Rivera. Both were expelled from the Communist Party, affiliated with Leon Trotsky's Fourth International, and hosted him during his final years in Mexico. Kahlo had numerous affairs with both men and women, including Trotsky, Isamu Noguchi, and Judith Barreto, her nurse. Produced over 200 paintings in her lifetime, mostly self-portraits. Spent her last 10 years crippled and often confined to her bed. Since her death, she has been acclaimed as one of Mexico's foremost painters.
Pues bien, hemos puesto nuestras diferencias a un lado y adoptado estas reformas, buscando un punto medio entre los derechos del individuo y los de la sociedad. Y ahorita nos felicitamos. La comunidad gay nos dice, bien hecho. Y nos regresamos al año 1987 muy satisfechos, ¿verdad? Pues no estoy segura. Nuestra investigación comenzó con el desecho. Pasó por los hombres heterosexuales o gays tan implicados y concluyó con la policía. ¿Pero es esto suficiente? El esquema que tenemos es el correcto, concluyendo en fijar nuestra mirada sobre los cuerpos reducidos. Pero no son la policía y los tribunales solo parte de un gran aparato estatal que desde el siglo XIX, especialmente desde la guerra, se inmiscuye cada vez más en el control de lo privado. Usando una vasta gama de ciencias sociales para invadir el espacio privado. ¿No es verdad que el Estado ha acelerado su proyecto de clasificar, organizar y definir lo que es público y lo que es privado? Así mientras el capitalismo avanzado parece promover mucha variedad en las respuestas individuales a la organización social, a través del consumismo, las diversiones y la destrucción de las familias. Al mismo tiempo le favorece al Estado el reorganizar estas diversas acciones individuales, incluida la sesión sexual, para formar una apariencia del orden social. La vida privada se convierte así cada vez más en el objeto de la vigilancia de las agencias sociales del Estado, de sus procesos fiscales, de estadísticas y de sus programas de seguro. No es verdad que la actividad sexual en los baños es una amenaza, porque es una actividad anónima y pública, y para vigilarla solo se pueden usar los medios más duros de represión. Los medios más sutiles del control estatal ya no funcionan. La mano dura de la ley se tiene que utilizar para remendar y deshacer. Amigos, quizás hemos fracasado, porque aunque estas soluciones son importantes, son solo un primer paso en el desafío al control estatal de nuestras realidades sociales y sexuales. El sexo en los seminarios es así no una metáfora, sino un ejemplo concreto de la batalla que se pierde. Es decir, la batalla para emanciparnos todos como sujetos sexuales.
Looks bad.
Gloria, why didn't you tell us?
He's flipped out.
Ben, can't kill your secret.
We'd better move.
Inside, please. Read business.
Well, I've had a great time. It was a pleasure meeting you both, Miss Loring. Miss Weil?
Oh, I hope you all come again soon.
Perhaps next time, Frida, you can paint my portrait.
Oh, mierda. From now on, I'm speaking to self-portrait.
Maybe we can figure this out. If Dorian was working for the cops, maybe he was the one who brought us here, who wrote the letters. But I don't get it. And usually the cops want to infiltrate groups that are still alive.
I just wish that I had never let that horrible Dorian Gray into our home.
But you had no choice, Miss Weil. Don't worry. I'm not really here. Just a picture. But you mustn't be so depressed. Haven't failed. Perhaps you were expecting the sort of success that appears in newspaper headlines. Parliament repeals anti-gay laws, sweeping police reforms instituted, discrimination against homosexuals is outlawed. That's not what this is about.
Well, really, Dora, I think you have some explaining to do. What are you? Are you one of the police? Or are you one of us? Or what?
Do I look like a cop? I refused to read from my biography the other night because it tells many lies about my life. It says my dreadful secret is my desire. It's the wrong story. And its poor author paid the price. But there is still some truth to what Oscar wrote. I'll read you some. Vice and virtue are to the artist materials for an art. All art is at once surface and symbol. Those who read the symbol do so at their peril. It is a spectator, and not life, that art really mirrors.
But where is your portrait, Dorian?
It was never my portrait, Frida, nor did it hide the secret of my life. It was a mirror, and the police were the spectators. Your picture became a portrait of the police.
But this is unfair. You can't just let us go like this.
Our work is never finished. It's true. For now, you've paid your dues and I have paid mine. And now your cab is here to take you to the station.
Mierda.
I can't quite figure out what exactly it is. Maybe we can find it.
Fine, what do you think?
Greyson.